This meeting come to order. Today is Tuesday, September 12th, 2017. This is a voting meeting of the Prescott City Council. Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any introductions?
Well, no, we're going to do that here in a minute, but I acknowledge Father Ralph.
Okay.
Appreciate him being here to do this today.
All right, thank you.
And I'd like to introduce Sherry Hanna. Good to see you here, Sherry.
All right, thank you. Our invocation today will be by Father Ralph with Sacred Heart. Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Jessica.
Would you like to bow your heads for our prayer? Loving God, we beg you to transform us into people of peace. Where we encounter hatred, make us instruments of love and compassion. If others injure us, let us be generous in pardoning them. Help us to bring hope to a world so often crushed by despair. Help us to bring joy and light to a world that is so much oppressed by darkness and gloom. Because it is only in giving that we will receive, and it is only by becoming people of peace that we can bring true peace to our world. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Would you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Oberg,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lamerson.
Here.
Councilman Blair.
Yes.
Councilman Lazell.
Here.
Councilwoman Orr.
Here.
Councilman Shiska.
Here.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. City Manager, you have any announcements?
No, sir.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for coming today, and I know many of you are taking time out of your busy day to come in here, and if you do come up later on to discuss anything at the podium, try and keep your comments short. Questions directed to me, not to the individual, and we'll give you 5 minutes for any discussion that you have at the podium. Proclamations.
Proclamation 7A, proclaiming September 15th, 2017 as National POW MIA Recognition Day.
Be fine. All right. POW MIA National Recognition Day, September 15, 2017. Hi, nice ladies. Come on up.
Come on up here.
Yeah, come up on the platform. Yeah.
Get right next to it.
I don't bite, honest. Really,
I don't
I'm
know.
really easy going.
Yeah.
Whereas in 1998, the United States Congress designated the third Friday in September of every year as POW MIA National Recognition Day. And whereas tens of thousands of members of our nation's armed forces have endured imaginable suffering and privation as prisoners of war. And whereas thousands of other loyal Americans served and sacrificed in the defense of liberty and freedom, but tragically never returned home. And whereas there is evidence that Americans are still being held in captivity, and whereas American armed forces have long held commitment to the vow to never leave a service member behind. And whereas our grateful nation will never forget the pain suffered by prisoners of war and missing in action families, to live without knowing their loved one's fate or knowledge of their final resting place. And whereas our grateful nation expresses its gratitude to the American prisoners of war and missing in action, and will always reinforce the vow, you are not forgotten. Therefore, Harry Oberg, Mayor of the City of Prescott, Arizona, proclaims September 15th, 2017 as POW MIA National Recognition Day, and encourages all citizens to plan and conduct appropriate remembrances, ceremonies, and activities, and has set his hand and caused the seal of the City of Prescott to be affixed this 12th day of September 2017. Would you like to address the world?
I'll just say thank you for recognizing these veterans who served so valiantly and their families. And my name is Barb Umke. I'm the director of the VA here in Prescott. And these are 3 of our staff, and we do have a POW MIA recognition ceremony planned for Friday. So at 11 at the flagpole. Thank you. Please come.
Thank you. And I would ask everybody in the audience to please give a standing ovation for our MIAs and our missing in actions and our prisoners of war. We in the City of Prescott will never forget. Thank you.
Go ahead and read the second one.
Proclaiming September 21st, 2017 as International Day of Peace.
Who's here for peace?
Thanks. You're welcome.
Hello. It's my privilege to read the proclamation, International Day of Peace. Whereas the issue of peace embraces the deepest hopes of all peoples and remains a guiding inspiration of humanity. And whereas on August 27, 1928, the United Nations joined other nations in adopting the Kellogg-Briand Pact, an agreement to outlaw war. The pact was signed in Paris at the French Foreign Ministry by the representatives of 62 countries. And whereas in 1981, the United Nations proclaimed the International Day of Peace be devoted to commemorating and strengthening the ideals of peace both within and among all nations and peoples. And whereas the United Nations expanded the observance of the International Day of Peace in 2001 to include the call for a day of global ceasefire and nonviolence, and invited all nations and people to honor a cessation of hostilities for the duration of International Day of Peace. And whereas Prescott supports the observance of the International Day of Peace, which affirms a vision of our world at peace and fosters cooperation among individuals, organizations, and nations as members of a worldwide human community. And whereas global crises impel all citizens to work toward converting humanity's noblest aspirations for world peace into the practical reality of a culture of peace for future generations, locally and globally. Now therefore, I, Harry B. Oberg, Mayor of the City of Prescott, Arizona, do hereby proclaim September 21st, 2017 as International Day of Peace, and urge all government departments and agencies, organizations, schools, community groups, and individuals in our city to commemorate in an appropriate manner the International Day of Peace on September 21st, and promote the expansion of the aspirations of a culture of peace this day to every day. This may include community service projects, cultural exhibits and performances, a moment of silence, ringing of bells, sharing the universal message, may peace prevail on earth, at noon, vigils, religious services in our places of worship, direct actions, and other education and public awareness activities in order to help establish a global embracement of peace in our homes, our communities, and among nations. And would you like to tell us what's going to happen on September 21st in our community?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank Mayor Oberg and the City Council for supporting us in this endeavor, the Peace Builders. And we have 5 events beginning on September 16th, and we will end with a vigil at the square on September 21st. And we thank you again for recognizing this week and for your affidavit. And we do have some flyers and things on the table in the back if you would like to take them. So thank you again for proclaiming Prescott the City of Peace.
You're welcome. And I presented Mary with a
Read the next proclamation.
Proclaiming September 17th through the 23rd, 2017 as Constitution Week.
Do we have any of our founding fathers here today?
Founding mothers.
This proclamation, oh,
I'm sorry.
that's all right. This proclamation is for Constitution Week. Whereas September 17th, 2017 marks the 230th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to officially recognize the patriotic celebration which will commemorate the occasion, and whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through September 23rd as Constitution Week. Now therefore, I, Harry Oberg, Mayor of City of Prescott, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through September 23rd, 2017 as Constitution Week, and ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed us through this guardian of our liberties, remembering what lost rights may never be, remembering that lost rights may never be regained. Congratulations to us all.
We'd like to thank Mayor Oberg and the council members for recognizing Constitution Week. We of the DAR are very active in promoting education for our Constitution and for the Revolutionary War as we continue forward. So to have Constitution Week recognized as well as our display at the library is excellent, and we want to thank you for that.
Okay, we'll move on to consent agenda.
Item 9A, draft minutes for the June 15th, 2017 budget workshop, the June 15th, 2017 special voting meeting, and the June 17th, 2017 voting meeting. Item B, official canvass of the City of Prescott primary election held on August 29th, 2017. Item C, city contract number 2018-049 to Rational Molding, Inc. for supply of the 300-gallon containers and lids. Item D, city contract number 2018-2052 to the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality for the wastewater treatment aquifer protection permit annual renewal. Item E, city contract number 2018-2053 to the Arizona State Land Department for water line easement rental. Item F, resolution number 44016-1610, approving submittal of grant request to the Tohoto O'odham Nation, Gila River Indian Community, Pasquale Yaqui Tribe, and the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. Item G, city contract number 2018-050 for Coalition for Compassion and Justice. Item H, contract number 2018-2051 for the purchase of 130 2018 Easy Go Elite Golf Parts and Accessories. Item I, resolution number 4402-1611, approving and amending joint funding agreements with the United States Geological Survey.
I don't have anybody from the council indicate they wanted to pull any, so do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve consent agenda items 9A through 9I.
Second.
I have a motion, a second vote, please.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you. Move on to the liquor agenda.
Item 10A1, public hearing and consideration. Wait, I might be on the wrong one here. Okay. Public hearing and consideration for new liquor license application for Series 18 craft distiller liquor license from Scott Allen Whitney, applicant for the Hometown Brewing Company, DBA Coppertop Steelworks. Location 220 Southwest Montezuma Street, Unit B. Mayor and Council, this is a request for a new Series 18 in-state craft distillery liquor license. According to ARS 4-207, it is excluded from the 300 horizontal feet of the public or private school building with kindergarten programs or grades 1 through 12, or within 300 horizontal feet of the fenced recreational area adjacent to such school building. The business is not yet open and is currently being remodeled. The application has been determined to be in compliance with the city requirements and being recommended for approval. The application has been paid and the application has been posted at the location for the required 20 days. No public comments have been received. The applicant, Steve Whitney, is present to answer any questions you may have.
Come on down.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and City Council.
I see you got both items 1 and 2 here, so both the Series 3 and the
You want me
Series...
to read that one next? Or
Yeah, go ahead and read that one too. And then
My name
we'll
is
talk
Scott,
about
too,
it.
just for the record.
Okay. Public hearing and consideration for an acquisition of control for a Series 3 microbrewery liquor license for Scott Allen Whitney, applicant for Hometown Brewing, DBA Coppertop Ale House, location 220 South Montezuma Street. Mayor and Council, this is the request for an acquisition of control for a Series 3 microbrewery liquor license. According to ASRS, it is excluded from the 300 horizontal feet of the public and private school building with kindergarten programs or grades 1 through 12, or within 300 horizontal feet of the fenced recreational area adjacent to such school building. The business is currently in operation. The applicant has been determined to be in compliance with the city requirements and being recommended for approval.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
All right. Well, we're doing a little craft distillery. So we've been, as you guys know, the brewery's been in operation almost a year now. So we're expanding our operations into a small craft distilling operation. We don't have plans for any tasting room at the moment. It's just going to be a production facility where we plan to offer our product to various restaurants and other drinking establishments around Prescott. So we've got some exciting things in the mind for some gins and things like that, using some of our local junipers and vodka and some other infused things using local mint and just some fun, really small town handcrafted stuff. So. Oh, and yes, she reminds me, it's almost on top of the old speakeasy in that same building, which is pretty exciting. There's a lot of history. So it's fun.
So you're remodeling your business right now?
The back, we have a
Just the
space
back part?
behind the brewery, which is a separate rental, separate address, and we're going to be remodeling that space to turn it into the distillery production area. Yeah.
Okay, so the front section is still open?
Yes, yeah,
You're
no
still
changes whatsoever to
serving
the brewery.
German food?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I might
Brats
have
and
to,
pretzels.
might have to drop down.
All right.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
wish you best of
Thank
luck.
you for considering it.
Do I have any public comment on either of the two liquor license Series 18 or Series 3? Okay, back to item A1. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Have motion, second vote, please.
A unanimous vote, 7-0.
Do you have a second motion?
Mayor, I move to approve a recommendation for liquor license application number 1813303 for a new Series 18 craft distiller liquor license for Hometown Brewing Company, DBA Coppertop Steelworks, location 220 Southwest Montezuma Street, Unit B.
Second.
Have a motion, second vote, please.
Passes unanimously.
Okay, we'll move on to A2. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Have a motion and a second vote, please.
Passes unanimously.
Do you have a second motion?
I also move to approve for liquor license application number 03133-025 for an acquisition of control for a Series 3 microbrewery liquor license for Hometown Brewing Company, DBA Coppertop Ale House, location 220 South Montezuma Street.
Second.
Motion and a second vote, please.
Passes unanimously, 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Move on to item 3.
Item 10A3, public hearing and consideration for a new liquor license application for Series 10 beer and wine liquor license from Kim Kenneth Kowalski, applicant for Circle K Stores, Inc., DBA Circle K Store number 9525, location 940 Willow Creek Road. This is a request for a new Series 10 beer and wine liquor license. The building is where the Hastings was located, and it will be torn down and a new one will be built in its place. The applicant wanted to have the liquor license in place when it was ready to open for business. No public comment has been received, and marketing manager Jason Hollister is present to answer any questions you may have.
Is the applicant here? Come on down.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. You want to explain what's going on here?
Basically, we're looking to get a liquor license for a new Circle K store where the old Hastings was.
Okay.
Looking approximately a year down the road, but we'd like to have all the licensing and stuff in place at the time of open.
Okay, when do you think you'll open?
Approximately a year.
Full year, okay.
It's going to be at least a year. I mean,
Okay.
tear down the building, gas pumps, the whole nine. So it's going to be have a deli, the whole 9 yards. So it's really exciting.
I think it's going to be a great location.
We hope so.
Any questions, comments from the council?
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's great.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate that. Do we have any comments from the public? Do you have a motion?
Mayor, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
You have a motion and a second vote, please.
Passes unanimously, 7-0.
Do you have a second motion?
Mayor, I move to approve for liquor license application number 101-33318 for a new Series 10 beer and wine liquor license for Circle K Store, Inc., DBA Circle K Store, number 9525, location 940 Willow Creek Road.
Second.
Have a motion and a second vote, please.
Passes unanimously, 7-0.
Let's move on to item 4.
Item A4, approval of Series 16 W Fair Festival liquor license application for Superstition Meadery LLC located at Grand Highland Hotel 150 South Montezuma Street. Applicant Jennifer Herbert, application number 17-075S. Day and time of the liquor license sales Saturday, November 11th, 2017 from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. The applicants have been determined to be in compliance with city requirements and are being recommended for approval.
Is there any public comment? Do you have a motion?
Mayor, I move to forward Farm Winery Fair Festival License Application Number 17-075S to the Arizona State Liquor Board with a recommendation of approval.
Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second vote, please.
Passes unanimously.
Okay, let's move on to item B1.
Item C1, special liquor license.
B1, yeah.
Special events.
B1.
Okay.
That's it.
That's weird.
That's B1. It's the Heritage Park.
Approval of Series 15 special liquor license application for Prescott Meals on Wheels location, Cortez from Union to Goodwin, and Goodwin from Cortez to Montezuma. Applicant Tina Blake, City application number 17-074S, date and time of sales liquor event Saturday, September 21st, 2017, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. The
Go ahead.
applicants have been determined to be in compliance with city requirements and are being recommended for approval.
That was
There's
number
one
two.
other one.
There's another one, number 1.
Oh, I went to 2. I thought he said 2. I'm sorry. Application for Series 15 Special Event Liquor License Application for Prescott Animal Park Association. Event location, Heritage Park Zoological Sanctuary, 1403 Heritage Park Road. Applicant Martha Borgen Chavez. City application number 17-070S. Date and time of event, liquor license Saturday, October 1st, 2017, from 2 p.m. to 6:30 p.m.
Any questions, comments from the council? Any from the public? Do you have a motion?
Mayor, I move to forward special liquor event liquor license applications 10A1 and 10A2 to the Arizona State Liquor Board with the recommendation of approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second vote, please.
Passes unanimously, 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll be moving on to the regular agenda, and I'm going to pull item F for further discussion and in a executive session, future executive session. So we'll move on with 1A.
Regular agenda, A, approval of surplus auction with Harris Auction utilizing city contract number 2017-25256 for sale of 10 surplus assets listed in attachment A.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This item requests approval for the sale of 10 surplus asset items listed in attachment A. The Fleet Service Division is responsible for the proper sale of city assets that have met their useful life. Vehicles and equipment that exceed $3,000 in value require council approval to dispose of per the city code. The list of assets has been reviewed and approved by the Fleet Asset Review Board. The assets meet the criteria established by the Fleet Services Division for replacement, including but not limited to mileage, excessive maintenance costs, reliability, safety issues, and utilization. Fleet Service will utilize contract number 2017-256 with Harris Auction to auction off the assets in attachment A. The proceeds will be returned to the Vehicle Replacement Fund or the division that originally incurred the cost of the purchase. Harris Auction will be paid 7.5% commission from the proceeds. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Orr.
Yes, Mike, can you tell me why that dump truck only has 4,472 miles?
That's an error.
okay.
So it does list that as 4,000 miles, but it's
It does.
because the odometer and the cluster has been replaced. So
Oh,
legally, when you sell it, you have to list it with the mileage listed on the odometer. And we have to sign something verifying that we know that it's not correct.
so it actually has about,
If
like
I had
the
to guess,
others.
it'd be well over 100,000.
okay, all right. I just wondered.
We
why
can go
there's-
back and I can get you that
No, that's
information. Because I can get that out of our fleet management system.
Okay.
Yeah, any other questions, comments from the council? Any from the public? Do you have a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve surplus auction with Harris Auction utilizing city contract number 2017-256.
Second.
Have a motion, and a second vote, please.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item B.
Item B, approval of purchase of one each 2018 Wheeler P385A from Empire Cat using City of Tucson contract number 120377 pricing in the total amount of $203,124.43.
Mayor and Council, this item is requesting permission to purchase a 2018 Wheeler P385A paver. The paver will replace asset number 906 and will be purchased from Empire Cat using the City of Tucson contract pricing. The Street Maintenance Division utilizes a paver to repair failing portions of roadways, replace damaged or removed asphalt due to utility repairs, build or repave city-owned parking lots, pave dirt roads, and repair or replace mill-paved roads. Asset 906 was a 1999 Lee Boy paver, is being replaced due to severe damage to the flight deck, wear plates, hub motor, tracks, drive wheels, and main screed plate. The Fleet Services Division requested a quote from an authorized vendor in Phoenix for repairs. The estimate for the repairs was just under $30,000, which far exceeds the value of the vehicle. Additionally, that was just for the initial overview of the repairs. There could have been higher cost once they tore into that piece of equipment. Additionally, the Street Maintenance Division looked into renting a paver. The only company that offered a paver similar to size is Road Machinery, and it's only available for rent by the month at a rate of $6,000 per month for a 6-month term. So the rental costs would exceed the purchase price in 34 months. Fleet Services and Street Maintenance Division determined that replacing the paver would be in the city's best interest. The asset replacement was reviewed and approved by the Fleet Asset Review Board for an FY18 vehicle replacement. Considerations included the cost for repairs far exceeding the value and the vehicles being vital to the daily operations of the Street Maintenance Division. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, comments from the council? How long was the last one in operation?
Since 1999.
Since 1999, so we bought a new.
You can expect the new one to last at 15 to 20 years, depending on rate of use and maintenance. So
that's really a good deal, best over renting it and having to pay that rental price.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure that when you rent it, though, they probably repair it.
Not always.
Not always.
We've
okay.
had that issue with other heavy equipment where you are liable for damage to the equipment, and that could exceed $20,000 to $30,000 in a repair. So.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you very much. I noticed that we're paying for this with the streets fund.
Correct.
The ballot language for the street fund did not significantly limited expenditures solely for the building of streets. It also included maintenance, and that's what qualifies spending this kind of money out of the road tax for. Am I correct in that?
You are correct.
All right. I just thought that maybe we ought to put that out for the public to understand when it comes to certain things like this. If the ballot language is correct, we can do this.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right.
Any other questions, comments of the council? Any from the public? Do you have a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2018-054 with Empire Cat in the total amount of $203,124.43.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Vote, please.
Passes unanimously, 7-0.
Thank you.
Item C.
City contract number 2018-055 with Lion Engineering for design services for the airport trunk main phase 2 project in the amount of $490,830.
Great, thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Steve Oroz, Public Works, and the item before you now is a design contract with Lion Engineering for the airport trunk main. This is the 5th step in the 10-step process of centralization. This is that north end that connects to the airport reclamation facility. There is an existing sewer line in that along this alignment currently. It is undersized just for general, and with the centralization process, it was deemed to be needed to be larger to accept the flows. The section, as you can see here, there's a portion of the airport trunk main along the south here, and then there's a skip, and then it goes up to the reclamation facility. The reason for that is that that little blank section was constructed in cooperation with Walden Ranch. When they built their infrastructure there, we needed to put the trunk main in concurrently with their development instead of putting it in after they built their new roads. So that part's already designed and constructed and operational at this point. This is the rest of the airport trunk main project. Lion Engineering was selected for this project based on the on-call contracts that we do have, as well as their experience with the first phase of the trunk main. The project design is about 6 months for the 15,000 plus lineal feet of sewer line, and it's currently budgeted in the wastewater fund. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Councilman Blair.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, what year was that trunk main originally put in?
The experts are telling me around 77,
Okay.
1977.
And when the new one's put in, does the old one stay in ground or does it pull out?
It would be removed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the council? Any from the public? Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2018-55 with Lion Engineering in the amount of $490,830.
Second.
Have a motion and a second vote, please.
Passes unanimously, 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item D.
Adoption of ordinance number 5046-1586 to set a speed limit of 15 miles per hour in city-owned alleys. The cost of the speed limit signs, assuming 2 per alley segment, is estimated to be $43,095. Ordinance 5406-1586 of the Mayor and Council of the City of Prescott, Yavapai County, Arizona, amending Title IX, Chapter 9-1, Section 9-16 of the Prescott City Code by adding a new subsection, Section 9-1-16J, setting a speed limit of 15 miles per hour in city alleys, adding a severance clause, and providing for penalties.
Mayor and council, the mayor had brought to staff's attention a trend he had seen in alleys, and I'll let him speak to that, where speeding had become an issue. And we quickly realized that in order to enforce speeding in the alleys, we actually had to have something on the books and post it. So what this would do is put a regulation on the books and post speeds of 15 miles an hour in the alleys. And I'll let the mayor talk more about what he's seen and observed.
Yeah, basically, I've received a couple of complaints, particularly from people in the older section of town, up in Knob Hill, if you want to call it that. And if you go up there, you'll find that a lot of the alleys are extremely narrow, probably just wide enough to get one of our solid waste trucks down there to go pick up trash. And so a lot of people's backyards open into the alleys and garages open into the alleys, and people have been complaining about people driving at what appear to be excessive speeds, and felt that we should try and establish a speed limit. And so when we started looking into it, we found out that, I guess, and Mr. Pellegrini, you can probably explain what happened. I guess by state law, it's 25 miles an hour unless we change it.
The default speed limit, unless otherwise posted, is 25 miles an hour. So obviously, you know, we don't post our alleyways with any speed limits, so the default is 25 miles an hour. And therefore, in order to have a lower speed limit, we would have to adopt an ordinance, which is in front of you, as well as post in the alleys, you know, a sign or two, depending on if it's one way or not, to actually, the speed limit has to be posted in order for it to be enforced.
Is it to be at the beginning of the alley? Does it have to be
At some point in the alley.
Okay.
And it could be in, as long as, I mean, depending on if it's the alley is a block long, you know, you could either have it at each end of the alley, perhaps you could have it at midpoint in the alley, as long as it's sort of visible and it's sort of, there's notice of what the speed limit is, it would be enforceable.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thought about this for a while. You know, we talk about speed limits and go out on Willow Creek Road sometime and see how well the speed limit works. Another thing that I was thinking about is the enforceability with the limited amount of police officers, et cetera, we have. But I want to make sure that folks understand the speed limit's not just for vehicles. It's for bicycles, it's for skateboards, it's on anybody that's using public right-of-way, right?
I know it's for bicycles. I don't know if somebody on a skateboard is subject to a speed limit law, or for instance, if you could run 16 miles an hour, whether, you know, down that alleyway. I don't know if that.
All right.
It has to be a vehicle. It has to be considered a vehicle.
And I understand
Bicycles
that,
are
but if
considered
you've
vehicles.
seen the new motorized skateboards, you'll understand what I'm talking about, number one. And then number two, that brings to question, are skateboards legal on a street? Just bringing it up, this item's here for discussion. We're bringing it up, and I think the public needs to be aware, especially all those little monsters on their motorized skateboards. And some of them even have handles now.
I might have a conflict. I used to get to school back and forth on my skateboard when I was, and on the street, because we didn't have sidewalks where I grew up.
You must not have pushed it hard enough, John. I'm just trying to get a sense of what's legal and not legal, not only in the alleyways, but on the streets of the city of Prescott.
In this particular context, we're talking about city-owned alleyways, the service alleys where garbage cans go and things like that. Most of them are in residential areas. We have a few in the downtown area, which are the service alley, where we get deliveries and things like that. If we don't adopt this ordinance, there is a speed limit, and it's 25 miles an hour. That would be the default. This ordinance would lower that speed limit to 15, but only where those alleys were posted with a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit sign, if this were adopted, and would take 30 days before it went into effect.
Councilman Wilcox. Councilwoman Wilcox.
Thank you, Mayor. Although I support adoption of this ordinance, in the past, when people have complained about excessive speed and needing a speed limit lowered on a street, we've been told we have to have a traffic study, somebody has to get killed, it's got to be really justified. So why is it that we can impose a speed limit without a traffic study and all that hoopla?
Well, I see Ian coming up to talk about sort of traffic. I think we're talking about just in our narrow alleyways. We don't, again, the speed limit also contemplates what's called reasonable and prudent speed. And when we post a speed limit, the reasonable and prudent is the rule. So, for instance, even if you have a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, if it's snowy and icy, 15 might not be reasonable and prudent. And in theory, you could get cited for it by going the actual posted speed limit. So, reasonable and prudent is sort of what the law requires you to drive, because you can't have a single speed limit depending on weather and things like that. But there's no legal requirement to have a traffic study or some speed study done to adopt a speed limit. I think that's kind of the practice on a street, for instance. But we're talking about sort of, this is limited just to alleyways, which are usually one lane, one car width wide. And so what we're saying is 15, if this were adopted, 15 miles an hour would be the presumed reasonable and prudent speed. So you couldn't really go over that, but there could be instances, I guess, in theory, where even going 15 wouldn't be reasonable and prudent if it were, say, icy or something like that. But there isn't any sort of, I think it's a practice to, if you're going to lower a speed that's below what's sort of the standard, then I think you would want to have some justification as to why you're going to lower that speed. Because school zones have a sort of default speed limit. So there are those sort of generally accepted speed limits, and it's my understanding that alleyways, if you're going to have an alleyway, it's 15 or less.
Well, what's generally accepted at one point in time may become excessive as traffic volume increases, as we've seen on Willow Creek Road, which is winding and narrow, and that speed limit needs to be lowered.
Yeah, and the discussion today really sort of needs to focus on whether or not this council wants to adopt alleyway speed limits.
I understand.
If you want to have a broader discussion, I'm sure Ian can do a study session on it about sort of around town speed limits.
Yeah. So, Councilwoman Wilcox, the only thing I would say is that the Arizona statute, the Arizona state law sets forth 25 miles an hour in a residential and a business district. So when we usually get requests to lower speed limits on streets like that, you're varying from the standard. And so that's why you then conduct an engineering study, because it talks about that in the revised statute, that's how you would set forth the variation. Alleyways are typically posted at 15, and most states have 15 called out in their state statutes. Arizona does not. So what we do in Arizona is either we don't enforce, or if we want to, we need to pass a ordinance like this. And that's what a lot of cities in the Phoenix area and just around the state have done. But most states, if you go and look at sample states, they'll have 25 business and residential, 15 on their state laws. So then they don't have to post. I will say one thing, this is a lot of signs and a lot of money. Passing the ordinance, in my opinion, does not require us to necessarily post all the alleys. But what it does is it doesn't let us enforce in those alleys that aren't posted. So, you know, as a staff person or somebody who's looking over the budget, which this is not a budgeted project, we didn't budget this year for this kind of money. We could pass the ordinance could be passed by council, and then we could address the signing as it comes up in need. And that's what I would recommend, is that in those alleys where we have a need to control or monitor the speed, then we post. If we had it on the state laws, we wouldn't have to post it all, and we could do that. That's why all residential streets don't have 25s, but they can ticket because it's in the ordinance, you know, it's in the state statutes. And so that's my only concern, is that is a lot of signs. The 156 is probably a low estimate. I mean, if you look at our total alleys, I was just doing another count here, we're probably more 195 signs if we did one in each direction on each segment. And that's a lot of work, a lot of money in a location that's already narrow and has some problems. So that's my only comments regarding that, and that's why we have to pass the ordinance and why it's different than residential streets.
Good. Councilman Chiska.
Thanks, Mayor. You know, I've used this analogy before, but aren't we swatting a fly with a sledgehammer? $43,000 ain't chump change. And I agree with you, Ian. I think we'd be absolutely crazy to 15-mile-an-hour post every single alley that we have in this city. I think that there's got to be other ways to handle this situation. If it's just a matter of the council passing an ordinance and then us putting a sign in the problem alleys, then that's going to take care of the situation. If Chief Black wants to go ahead and have a guy with a radar gun sitting there in an alley, then she ought to do that. But, you know, I thought because this alley is naturally skinny, or these alleys, doesn't that naturally calm traffic? I'm kind of wondering if somebody's seeing 15 miles an hour in an alley that's really skinny, if they're going over 15 miles an hour, like 25 or 30 or whatever, you know, it's almost a death wish, because, you know, somebody could back out. I mean, you know, they're just not paying attention to their surroundings. So I would strenuously object to spending $43,000 on this situation.
If I could, one of the things that I say to residents, you know, residential requests for speed limit signs is really think about what you're asking for. On a lot of streets, cars may be actually going lower than 25. It's probably the same in alleyways. A lot of times when there's no posting, what you may think is fast, and so you request a sign to solve that, when we only give you a 25, sometimes you're noticing the driver to look at what the speed they're actually traveling at, and sometimes they actually go faster than they would because conditions on the street are so narrow. This is especially the case in narrow dirt roads, things like that. So we kind of encourage them not to take a speed limit sign. I kind of feel the same way in certain alleys. I think 15, if you post that everywhere where there isn't a problem, then you may be encouraging people to maybe go faster than they already do. That doesn't negate the fact that somebody complained. You know, I'm sure we've got complaints in alleys, but they aren't common. And so that's why I'm just encouraging the post as it is needed. Don't approve any kind of blanket posting. And I would say that on residential streets as well. We have a lot of signs that cost money to put up and to maintain. We should minimize those.
Councilman Blair?
Thanks, Mayor. I agree 100%. I think it's a waste of money, especially on some of the streets, the alleys around, Prescott. You talked about Prescott Heights. Some of those alleys are barely big enough to, matter of fact, the garbage trucks are too big to go down those alleys. And most of them, I won't say most of them, but a bunch of them are in poor repair anyhow because of the reconditioned asphalt that we've used on those alleys. We're downstream about 5 or 6 years and we have pothole problems in those alleys. So I don't see a need to put up more visual clutter unless it is determined an actual problem.
Councilwoman Orr?
Yes, well, I would agree, and I agree with Ian's recommendation here. I certainly would be fine with passing an ordinance to say 15, that's what it is. However, to put up signs, I think is, my husband always says, Billy, why are you going so slow? I may be going 5 down an alley, and then it might encourage me, like you said, to go to 15. And that to me seems a little high in some spots. So, no, I would not want to spend $43,000 on signs. But if there's a particular alley that's causing a particular problem, then let's address it. But to just blanket the city, I think is a mistake.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Any from the public?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Sandra Smith, 701 White Spar. Councilwoman Orr and Ian both know we have talked about this at the Bike Ped Committee. There are certain alleys in the city that are very narrow and they're blocked where pedestrians coming along the sidewalks can't see what's coming out of that alley till they're in it. Those alleys, I think maybe this would help address some of that because the drivers come shooting out of them and they're going a lot faster than 15 miles an hour. And I've even had this problem with police officers coming out of the alley right here because they forget there's a sidewalk in between or something. I don't know because, they're heading for the street. They forget to look.
And Sandra, we have talked about this at Bike and Pedestrian, and I think one of the things that we've also talked about are the mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
And we put the mirrors up so that you can see, and they really help. They help, but again, you can't put that in every place because they're very expensive.
No, I'm just saying some of the ones where they're really blind.
It's an education. That's right.
It might slow them down a little bit.
Do you really think people are doing 15 in this alley?
Some of them are going a little faster than that.
Okay.
And it's not just this alley, but there's several really blind alleys around town.
There are some
in the
blindness.
downtown area.
And we have done some things, I believe, Ian, to address that, right? Some of the blind alleys and striping and
Yeah, we talked about
yes, off of Bashford.
stop sign,
Some kind
stop
of
sign
warnings.
control, mirrors, and then we've also ordered stencils for the pedestrians. Now, it's not their issue, but we want them to be careful, so we've talked about the look stenciling on the sidewalk prior to those alleys.
That's right.
But that's certain locations where the building frontage is, there's zero setback.
Like at Bashford, when you're coming out of Bashford.
Yeah, Bashford's another one.
Okay.
And what about, could you use stenciling instead of signage on the road, on the alley beds to post the speed limit? Would that drop the cost, and could you do that?
Yeah, it's not posted. So stenciling is, you can add stenciling next to a posted speed limit sign to kind of enforce the
you
regulation.
Can't use it instead of?
No.
Oh, okay. That's what I was
It's a
trying to ask.
supplement to the regulatory sign.
Okay.
So you can't, unfortunately.
Oh, well, was a thought.
Could we possibly put this back to the Bike and Pedestrian Committee to come up with a recommendation with maybe certain spots? Go ahead and do the ordinance, and then we could look at, because Ian goes over this with us. Might be something.
You want to bring it up at the next
Sure.
bicycle committee? Okay, fine.
So Ian, you're good with that?
Any other public comment? Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance number 5046-1586.
Second.
To set speed limit 15 miles an hour on city-owned alleys.
Second.
Have a motion and a second vote, please.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next item.
E,
Approval of payments to PSPRS for general fund unassigned fund balance and the proceeds from the sale of hot shot buggies.
Thank you, Virginia. I just have a few slides, Mayor, to kind of help with the discussion here. One, just to bring up some stuff we've been talking about for the last 6 or 7 months. On the screen, I have the amounts that are in this year's budget that we talked about. We had the unassigned fund balance, $11 million, which was discussed during the budget process that if Proposition 443 passed, Council would consider that to the PSPRS. The Parker Hall refund, once the court ruling was complete, we would pay that out of the reserves as well. We have made the refunds out of the reserves. We are waiting for the court to make the final determination on the interest rate so we can finish that. The amount of the refunds was just over $1 million, $1,005,000, so the rest of it will be related to the interest when that comes. The dedicated tax, of course, as part of Prop 443 would, of course, be paid as we get into when those are going to be collected. And then our normal costs, the normal pension costs that are paid out of the budget, those are paid biweekly as the payrolls are done, as well as the portion of the annual required contribution that is related to the amortization of the unfunded liability. So that's a total of almost $26 million that was part of this year's budget. This is just the summary of the general fund page from our budget workshops. I rearranged the bottom a little bit for our discussion today and highlighted 2 items there. As you can see, that $11 million reduces our unassigned fund balance that's available at the end of the year from $16.7 million down to $4.6. That, along with, of course, our operational reserve, is reserved for operational needs. So if you're looking at available fund balance to cover operational shortfalls, you really have the policy amount, which is 20%, plus any unassigned fund balance you have. So, you know, we have the 12 million related to those. So that brings up the next question is, what is an appropriate level of fund balance to have in your general fund? So I look at the best practice, which comes from the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, again, which is a international organization of finance officers that provide management guidance to cities, towns, counties, and districts across the United States and Canada. Their recommendation, their best practice, is 2 months or 60 days of operating expenses as a general fund reserve as the minimum level. City policy, of course, as I said, was 20%. That's about $7.3 million. That is 73 days. So our policy currently exceeds the minimum by 2 weeks. In addition, we have to the 7.3. We currently have 15.6 in unassigned fund balance after the other things that came out of it in 2018 budget process. So we currently have about 230 days of reserve, which is well above the minimum, well above what is needed. If council does consider the 11 million and approve it today, that would leave a total of 11.9, which is the 7.3, which is a reserve policy, and the 4.6, which is a remaining unassigned, and that would provide 119 days, essentially twice what the minimum of the best practice is. So what would that do to our liability? You know, what would making this large payment, or these payments that we're talking about, do to our overall liability? As I'm sure everybody is sick of hearing about, the 2016 valuation put our liability at $78.5 million approximately. Combined, the 2 trusts together were about 31.1% funded. We have our required contributions, $7.8 million out of this year's budget, which are related to our annual our payrolls. And then the additional contributions, the $11 million that's being discussed, the $25 million, which isn't budgeted, but it was additional revenue that came in, and we will consider budget appropriation movement for that as we get further into the year. But the sale of Fire Station number 7, which the council authorized a couple of weeks ago for that to be sent, and that money has been sent to PSPRS. That was about $580,000. And then, of course, our estimate of tax revenue, about $6 million. So if in 18, if council approves these things along with what we've done, as well as the $6 million, we'll be sending about $25.3 million to PSPRS. So looking at the actuarial report from 2016, they have projections of how additional contributions over your annual required contribution will reduce or increase your funding status. Looking at those numbers from the 2016 actuarial, 2.2% increase for each million in the police PSPRS trust fund and 1.7 in the fire trust fund. So with these amounts, the projection using those things, not considering any assumption changes that might happen in the future with PSPRS, we would be able to move our funded position from 31% to 48%, or bring our 78.5 million down to about 59.2. Another question that came up is where does that put us in the grand scheme of the 256 or whatever the number is PSPRS trust? This graph that's up on the screen comes from the actuarial report for 2016. Currently, the police falls in this category. We're one of those 7 there, and the fire falls in the next category up. It's one of those 28. Assuming that everybody else stays the same, it doesn't move around, which of course I know is a broad assumption, we would move essentially 2 steps for each of our trust funds. The police would move to the 40 to 50% funded, and the fire would move to 50 to 60. It'd be about 51%. So with that, I would be glad to answer any questions or provide any other information.
Councilwoman Orr.
Thank you. Mark, really good information. Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to the citizens of Prescott who passed Proposition 443. Fortunately, we're having this discussion, not about where to cut next. And so that's a huge thank you to all the people that supported us, all the people out there working on this. So God bless you for that. Second, I just think it's really important. Yes, Shiska and I put this on the agenda, Councilman Shiska, because I think it's really important that we make a statement to our citizens. You voted yes on 443. We passed this. We passed this with, where are my figures? 9,137 voters said yes. 7,894 said no. So 54% of our citizens said yes. Let's get this done. And I will tell you, I believe probably half of the 46% that said no, they said no because they're concerned that we're not going to do the right thing with the money. I heard that over and over as I called voters and I said, you know, please vote yes on this. You guys aren't going to do this the right way. We need to show to our citizens we're absolutely committed, number one, to pay down this unfunded liability. So I think the sooner we can demonstrate this, the best for everybody. So let's get going on this and let's just do it.
Let's go.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Well, I think it's premature for us to dump $11 million into the PSPRS fund right now. What this council needs is expert advice from a municipal financial advisor on what the best timing is, the best amounts. Lay out a strategic plan for us to pay down our unfunded liability. We could have a major recession within the year. We don't know the impact of the 2 major hurricanes that our nation has experienced. They could cost all of us a lot of money. And if we dump a bunch of money into PSPRS right now, we could lose it all. I don't see what the rush is to make this decision today without getting good advice going forward. And Mark, I have a lot of respect for you, but I would like to see the council hire somebody who's got a big picture on how to best pay down unfunded liability in PSPRS. I voted for the sales tax because I thought it was the best immediate solution and it would help us avoid cutting services, much-needed services, police, fire, so forth. But it is not the long-term solution for PSPRS. We've got a lot more work to do, and we don't know what those reforms are going to be or how long they're going to take. So my preference would be to hold on to this $11 million, keep it in reserve, work with a financial advisor, and come up with a plan to guide us on amounts to pay down beyond our obligatory annual amounts.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks, Mayor. I agree that it looks real good up here that we could bring us up to a 35–40% funded performance. But I also agree that we're trying to move forward on some other issues, including the airport, and if we use the majority of our reserves at this particular point, or the majority of our unassigned cash, let me put it that way, we get confused with the term reserve. Unassigned cash, it kind of restricts us from doing other things. You know, when we got into this, we talked about maybe using 5 in addition with the obligatory amount, or we talked about maybe using 10. And I realize 11's close to 10, you know? So, I mean, it's one of those calls, you got to try and figure what you're going to do. I would feel more comfortable sending down an additional 5 along with the 8.3, so making it even 13. We would be bringing down bringing up our pension fund to about somewhere in the vicinity of 70 instead of 83. But when we try and do some things at the airport, we have the money available. We don't know what the recession's going to be, or we don't know if we're going to get a recession. There's expectations there's going to be a downturn in the economy as early as the middle of the year. Well, if that takes place, we may need that money. PSPRS isn't going to send it back to us. So that's where I'm at this point.
Councilman Shiska.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate that. You know, it's been premature for years. We've been kicking this can down the road, and there's always been a reason why we haven't done anything. You know, when the people voted for this, they voted expecting us to pay this down as soon as possible. Not to say we're premature. We've got to study this. Particularly, we have to hire somebody to do it. I just think that we need to give people a hell of a reason to once again be comfortable with the decisions we make. And I really do think that this is going to show the public that we're serious about this, not just a little serious about this, but we're very serious about this. And when we went out to the public and they supported us the way they did, I think it'd be a slap in the face if all of a sudden we said, well, I think we're going to pull back a little on this, and you know, we're going to do what we feel is prudent. I have to tell you, I don't think that's prudent. I think that we are making a huge mistake if we don't send as much as possible down there and let the public know that what they did was put in faith in city government once again.
Councilman Blair.
Thanks, Mayor. I won't be too long-winded, but I'll only say that we own the obligation. We owe it, and we have the money to pay it, and I think the sooner we get it done, the better off we're going to be. And if we can pay, you know, $25 million of that up front, that gives us $50 million left. And this thing's paid for in 4 years, and we give back to the public that tax we told them we give back to them early. the sooner the better as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not willing to pay somebody else to tell us how to run our business. That man right there wins award after award after award every year for the budget that he does, and I'm not willing to spend more money.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. So Mark, you're back on stage. All right? Fiscal year 18, we send them 25 million. All right? Fiscal year 19, what can we send them?
Well, definitely the proposition we estimate would be about 11 million in fiscal year, the next fiscal year, in fiscal year 19. And we would have our normal pension costs, which will be 1.3, 1.4 million again. Whether council at the time we put the next budget together wants to also include additional funds out of the general fund related to the payment of the unfunded liability above that, that will be a matter of discussion as we put that budget together.
Okay, my point there being, Mark, are we likely to get another $7.8 million bill as our annual contribution?
The contribution rates are set with a 2-year lag. So the rate that we're paying now in fiscal 18 came from the 2016 valuation. The payments that we send now into
advice, Nick says, the sooner you get this done as a community, the better off your community is going to be. Even with sending this $11 million down to PSPRS, we still have unassigned $4.6 million unassigned in the general fund. And that does not even touch the 20% that we were required by policy, which is, what is that, Mark? 7.3 $7.3 million. I feel very comfortable with doing this. And once again, I believe that we need to show this is exactly what the people that were against 443 said. This is what they're going to do. They're not going to send this money down. This is exactly what they said. So I believe we need to thank our citizens and let's do what we said we were going to do. We have budgeted this money. It is in our budget right now to pay this $11 million. So I certainly am 100% in favor of let's do this tonight. Let's get it done. Let's get a pension plan together. I would love to see some sort of a community citizen group that helps us look at this on a quarterly basis and maybe twice a year. We can do this. Councilwoman Wilcox, we really don't need to pay an expert to come in and tell us what we need to do. We owe this. Mayor, no one has a crystal ball. No one knows what's going to happen with the economy. Even if our economy goes down, we're going to have to look at this every year. And every year, I will tell you, I've got 2 years on this council. I will fight really hard to send down every penny that we can to get this off the back of the Prescott citizens so we can retire this tax.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark?
Yes, sir.
What are some of the other things that we've talked about moving forward with that if we diminish the unassigned dollars might be compromised?
I guess I'm not sure what you're talking about, what you've talked about. There's nothing else. The 4.6 is not budgeted in the 18 budget for any other council project, the remaining unfunded, unassigned fund balance.
Okay, so what you're saying is it's regardless of the unassigned amount of number, that's the 15 million or 16 million that has been unassigned, this will have insignificant impact on our ability to move forward if we take $11 million. I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
I'm saying that the unassigned portion was after this 11 million is 4.6 in the 2018 budget. That is not earmarked, it's not assigned, so I would call it unassigned in the next year budget or in the 5-year plan at this point. Council can assign it in a year. They can say, oh, we want to do something else, we want to build this or we want to do that. But it is not, there was nothing on the capital plan that it was put aside for.
All right, and so moving forward, it almost looks imperative that if you bring this pension fund back up where it belongs, it's going to cost the city far less a year from now, 2 years from now, and 3 years from now, if we stay the course.
Yes, yes. As the pension fund becomes more funded, the ARC, the annual required contribution, will be reduced.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I need to respond to a couple of things that were said here. And first of all, you know, I talked to a lot of people that were no for 443. And the two things that I heard was we need to try and make sure that we get something going down at the Capitol. And they felt that paying it, you know, approving the 0.75 might limit that ability to try and do something at the Capitol. I don't know whether that's true or not. We'll find out here in the near future. The second thing, of course, was that many of them thought that with the 0.75, we were going to create a slush fund of money in the reserve fund that, or in the general fund that we could use for other things. So, you know, we've always talked that if we're going to do this, we need to pay the ARC, the annual required contribution. Right now, 7.3, 7.8. You keep changing the number over there. You have to pay that, and then you also have to pay something additional. So if you're paying the 7.8 and you're paying everything out of the 0.75, you can probably start making some pretty good headway against your unfunded liability. But you need to do them both. And just to say we're going to just use the 0.75 and we're going to have that frees up money in the general fund for other things, that's what they were concerned about. They felt that that was incorrect. So that's the way I saw it. The other thing, of course, is, you know, Scott McCarthy, I talked to that guy. And yes, he did say.
McCready?
No, Scott McCarthy. What he said was basically that, yes, you owe it. Everybody agrees we owe it. We got to pay it, unfortunately. And we understand that. But at the same time, he said, the other thing you need to do is you got to make sure that additional money that's added on to your unfunded liability every year, you got to make sure you pay that. So he says you have to pay your ARC, and you also have to pay that additional money that's going to be added on every year. And right now, that's about another $6 million. So actually, the 0.75 just about takes care of that. I think that does a pretty good job. We paid a 7.8. We can put another $5 million in. That even adds more. I asked him how was that working out in Queen Creek, and he said, well, they keep asking me when are we going to see the thing go down because we keep having all this unfunded liability added on. So just understand what we're doing here. Again, I cannot support the $11 million. Not right now. I can support the $5 million. I'd be more than happy to do that. Any other questions or comments from the council? Yes, Councilwoman Wilcox.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, all I'm asking right now is that we defer this decision until we can meet with a financial advisor to advise the council as a whole. We've been getting anecdotes or Mayor, but you know, each one of us will talk to individuals and get information, but the council as a whole needs to get advice from a single advisor and lay out a plan before we get into reactive mode.
And somebody that's independent.
Independent, right. Not someone who's connected with an organization that has a political agenda, whether it's left, right, up, down, I don't care. It's got to be somebody who's independent, because it's our responsibility to make decisions that are in the best interest of people of Prescott. And if we dump $11 million right now, what other priorities are we setting aside? We really haven't followed through on our council strategic plan yet. We just gave it a very basic outline. We knew we had to stabilize the general fund, and we have that additional revenue. But what's the next step? What is our plan for paying down PSPRS without wasting money, without giving up other priorities that we know we're talking about? An airport terminal might be one of them. Something else might come up. They're not in our capital improvement budget right now. But we may be giving that up for the long-term future. And I don't want to see that happen.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mark. Does the projected receipts from 443 give us the money to stabilize the general fund, or does it provide the money to pay the bill?
It provides the money to bring down the unfunded liability, which in turn will reduce the annual required contribution, which will provide available resources in the general fund for vehicle replacement or whatever other projects the council brings forward. Just to clarify for the mayor, the annual required contribution for 2018 budget is $7.8 million. It's made up of two components, 1.3 for the normal cost and 6.4, 6.5 for the unfunded portion.
Thank you. I thought I heard 7.3 a little while ago. I was just trying to clarify that. Any other questions, comments from the council? Any from the public?
Good afternoon, Mayor Oberg and Council. My name is Sherry Hanna, and I am one of the co-chairs of Stand for Prescott Yes on Proposition 443. I am here speaking for myself, not on behalf of Stand for Prescott Yes on 443 committee. And I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank members of council that supported Proposition 443. After the August 29th, 2017 election, in which Proposition 443 was passed, an article appeared in the August 30th, 2017 Daily Courier, in which there was a quote saying, "Since we have a dedicated funding source now, I think we should look at the enterprise funds to make a significant down payment," end of quote. And that's what I want to address today. After the quote appeared, my phone started ringing, and people were concerned, and so was I, that the money be moved from certain enterprises funds to make payments to begin paying down the PSPRS debt. This is not what the voters passed. We asked the voters to pass a 3/4 cent sales tax increase that would solely be used to pay down the PSPRS unfunded liability. I understand that the $11 million, which was previously budgeted to be a down payment if Prop 443 passed, will be applied to the PSPRS debt. To start moving money around, borrowing from certain enterprise funds is very risky. My personal experience, when you borrow from Peter to pay Paul, something always happens, and it generally is not good. Should we slide into another recession or unseen circumstances arise that could severely jeopardize the stability of the enterprise funds that were borrowed from? Prop 443 was a long, hard battle fought on both sides, and in the end, the voters put their trust in us and passed Proposition 443 to pay down the debt by using the sales tax increase. During this process, it is imperative that there is oversight, accountability, and transparency to the voters. The average citizen like myself must be able to look at a printout of the sales tax increase income coming into the city and seeing the payout to the PSPRS system to coincide accordingly. I shouldn't have to have a degree in accounting in order to understand if the PSPRS payments were made because money was moved around from fund to fund to make the payments, and whether the money was paid back to those funds after it was taken out. I implore you to stick to the original plan that Proposition 443 was intended to do, dedicating the 3/4 sales tax increase to solely going to pay down the unfunded liability of PSPRS. Done correctly, Prescott could show the way for the rest of the state on how to deal with the unfunded liability of PSPRS while the legislature continues to make changes to the PSPRS system. And I'd like to add, just listening to everyone talk and make their comments about how much money we need to send down to the state. When we approached the voters and did forums and talked with people, we told them that $11 million was previously put in the budget to make a significant down payment if the tax passed. Everyone that we talked to were okay with that because they thought that was a good plan to make a big initial payment and then wait until January 1st, when we see the sales tax revenue coming in from then on, and we make our payments according to what the sales tax brings in. So I think if I see both sides of the argument here, but I think if we don't send down the 11 million like we previously said, it will be another opportunity for the voters to say, you said this, now you're doing this. Another chance to throw mistrust back at our council and our government. So I know that's a hard decision. I can see, like I said, both sides of the argument on sending down an initial payment. But like I said, people that heard about it and people that voted for it were okay with the initial 11 million because it had been previously put in the budget to do that if Proposition 443 passed. So thank you for your time and allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Next.
Charles McVeigh, zip code 301. So many thoughts in so little time. Mayor, some of your discussion has to do with what the market's going to do. I follow several economic websites, and I know what they say. But when we're putting plans together, as a consultant, I always advise my clients, you can't tell what the market's going to do. It may be fantastic, it may be a disaster. You have to chart a middle course. And the middle course that we have to go on this is we've got to pay that debt. Nothing the legislature is going to do will absolve us of that responsibility. It's a pipe dream to think that they're going to do something. And they don't want to do anything. They're going to have to be dragged to it by a constitutional change brought up by the people. That's going to be extremely difficult. And if it's even done, it will take years. And so we have got to get the unfunded liability, that debt, and it is a debt, we've got to get it down to a manageable level. Mayor, both you and Councilwoman Jean, in your talk, you conflate the problem with PSPRS and the problem we have with the unfunded liability. They are separate issues. We've got to deal with what we can deal with. We can't deal with the other. Again, that's going to take years. And made a couple of quick notes here. I would suggest that what we really need to get into, and this goes to the question about an independent resource. It's really difficult to get an independent resource, and I come from that background. There is a federal program called TSP, Thrift Savings Program. It is a defined contribution. It is called by the New York Times the best program in the country. Its cost is minimal. On a $1,000 investment, it's 38 cents last year. However, and I forget the name of the professional organization, the president of the financial advisors that do these sort of things is against that because it's not bringing money in for the people that he represents. So, you know, it's a damned if you do and damned if you don't. And then the last part is what Councilwoman Orr's talked about. Some of the arguments, Mr. Mayor, I apologize, Mayor, that you're talking about have been considered by the citizenry, especially that, well, if we vote this in, you won't use the money from the reserves, and now you want to do exactly that. It's going to be a self-fulfilling forecast for them. So please don't go down that path. Again, we've got to get that liability down to a manageable level. It's going to get out of control. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have something, Councilman Blair?
I'll do it after they're done.
Okay. Next.
Mayor and Council, my name is Phil Good. As I think all of you know, I did not support this tax, but the voters decided to implement it, and now the responsibility is to manage it well. I applaud the council, and I've made some comments about the decision to use some of these excessive reserves before tapping into tax dollars, and I think that's the right thing to do. Mayor, I agree with most of your comments, and Councilwoman Wilcox, I agree with yours too. I think the question here is a matter of timing. Trying to time the market in the long term is a big mistake. Anybody who's had long-term investments and has made continued investments in a broadly diversified portfolio has done well. And those who try to figure out when and dump big dollars in sometimes regret it tremendously. I think the best solution here is to continue with your commitment to that $11 million in excess reserves, but do a dollar cost averaging on it. Send it down over a 12-month period of time. That way you'll probably catch what is likely to be a downturn in the market. 6 of the last 7 years after a presidential election has seen a market decline in the range of 15 to 20%. If that happens this time, then if you are dollar cost averaging, you won't be paying a big penalty for that. You'll then see the tax revenue start to kick in January, and you will be dollar cost averaging those investments. So if you look at it in the long run, this is going to take 5 or 10 years at the most. You should probably be able to smooth out those peaks and valleys and end up with a pretty good result. So I applaud you for tapping into the real estate that was surplus and the buggies that were surplus. And keep in mind that GFOA recommends a 20% prudent reserve, which you already have. And then this $16.5 million that's unassigned is in addition to that. So even by spending $11 million, you'd end up with a 35% unassigned reserve, which is extremely healthy. So I think you've got a lot to work with here. And again, I think if you looked at most financial advisors, they would recommend dollar cost averaging. The Dow closed today at over 22,000. It's only 4 points away from the S&P 500 at 2,500. Those are very high numbers. Now, they're not as high as 2008 when the earnings per share for the S&P was almost 30. But it is at 17 now, and that's considered a well-funded amount. So what happens next year or the year after, anybody's guess. But I think dollar cost averaging is the way to go. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could real quick. Phil, I just wanted to say something real quick. This is a side note. Thank you and the P&Z for your due diligence and the long hours on the Deep Well Ranch project. So thank you.
And we're still going on it. Thank you.
Next.
Hi. My name is Robert Graybill, Prescott, Arizona. And, you know, I don't come to these meetings a whole lot, you know, and I'm listening to the suit and tie guys here talking about this unfunded liability. And there's only 2 people here that actually voted yes and didn't listen to Mayor Kirkendall to start with, is Mr. Lamberson and Mr. Blair. Now, how much of that unfunded liability resulted from the Granite Mountain settlement? How much of it is in there? Do you guys know? I mean, those, you know, I'm not against paying those guys their due diligence. I mean, I was all for that. But I think you guys got railroaded into paying something you should have never paid. And now we're paying for it again, and you want to raise the sales tax. You know, this is the first year in my lifetime since I turned 21, which used to be the voting age, and I'm old, but I've never voted in an election this year. I looked at the city council candidates, and I thought, man, who are these people? I looked at Proposition 443, and I said, you know what? My God, am I back in California again, where you guys are going to put this money down here? Then all of a sudden, everybody's got their hand out trying to grab something. Pay the money. You know, you owe it, you voted for it, you pay it. You know, that's all I got to say. I mean, I'm just a simple man. Do I have a financial advisor? No. Do I do well in life? Yes. I mean, look, you know, I'm dressed in my street clothes now. But have I done well in my lifetime? I certainly have. But one of the reasons I moved out of California was to get away from all these idiots. I mean, you look at the state of California right now, it's crazy. And this place is heading in that direction. Unless you guys do something about it, we're going to be the state of California. God help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Terry Christensen, Prescott, Arizona. I think most of you know that I am
was part of the PAC and part of the PAC for 443 stand for Prescott. I threw my heart and belief into this proposition. Never really have stood up about something politically other than paying attention to what's going on. When we addressed the people, and yes, Billy, like Billy, we heard a lot of the people that were opposed to this, they didn't believe in your city government. I heard, and no disrespect, Councilwoman Wilcox, but a lot of that is, as soon as this, if this passes, the city is going to take that. They're going to be concerned. They're not going to dedicate. They're going to say, we don't know when the hurricanes are going to happen. You're going to find, city government's going to find an excuse not to spend the money. We have told them that this was a dedication, this was a commitment to pay it down. Whether or not you voted yes on 443, it passed by 54%. I would be highly disappointed in this council and for everyone that we promoted and asked. This was not a PSPRS. This was as we always said, this was a quality of life for Prescott. We told the citizens that this was a matter, this was important. If you turn around and say, we don't know what's going to happen in a year, we don't know what's going to happen in 2 years, we don't know how the hurricanes are going to affect us. We budgeted in $11 million, whether or not that was approved, what you did, show the city, show the people that voted this and that actually really did care about this, and show those people that voted no because they didn't trust their city council that this is exactly what we said we were going to do and you're going to do it. Pay this down. We said 10 years, but before that we want to get rid of it. So just say what we promised me. I'm a citizen, I'm a voter. I cared about this, I care about this. I would be highly disappointed, and no offense to Mayor Pro Tem, or Councilwoman. Send the 11 million, show that we're dedicated to this. You cannot contradict it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor and council and staff, I'm Sanford Cohen, speaking on behalf of the Prescott Chamber of Commerce Board as the board chairman. As you know, the Prescott Chamber supported Proposition 443 with a caveat. And the caveat in the resolution that we approved stated, and I'm quoting this as close to verbatim as I can, that the Chamber supports the approval of Proposition 443 provided that the City of Prescott make its maximum effort to retire the PSPRS debt as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Now, I know a little bit about economics, and I can tell you that the buying stocks on margin that killed the economy in 1929, making cheap money available to people so they could buy houses with nothing down and then walk away from them when gas prices got too high that they couldn't afford to make their interest-only mortgage payment and decide instead to keep gas in their tanks. Those kinds of things could happen again, not very likely. Yes, we've experienced a little bit of a bump relative to the flat growth that we had over the last 8 years. And whether or not that sustains itself is almost entirely within our country's control. We control our own interest rates. We can basically decide, what kind of economy we want to have as long as people around the world continue to buy our debt. And they will. Because despite everything that you hear, read, and see, the United States is still the most stable place in the world. And then we're going to attract that kind of investment. And quite frankly, I remodeled the house during Katrina, and I bought a lot of my materials right before Katrina hit, and there was a 20% increase in the cost of drywall right after Katrina. So we're going to see some of that too. Fortunately or unfortunately, because we live in one of the greatest places in the world, people are going to be willing to pay a little extra to build a house in one of the finest places in the country. So I'm not really all that concerned about Prescott's future in terms of growth. What I am concerned about is the growth of the PSPRS debt. And I would like to see this removed from our purview as soon as possible. Financial advisors advising the PSPRS board is what got us in this trouble. So finding an independent source for objective information about a strategy is in and of itself impossible because people will bring their own prejudices and their own slant to whatever strategy they might want to suggest. So the easiest thing is just make the thing go away. It's not going to really hurt the city. We got plenty of reserve in order to do it. And I don't know how much the rainy day fund replenishes itself going forward once we get past this big down payment. But my guess is that, showing the voters that we mean business by getting a big chunk of this thing taken off up front, that's something your business community approves of. We surveyed our members, and they were overwhelmingly in favor of 443. And the members of the board, who are all business people, said that as long as we get rid of this thing as soon as possible, then we're for it. And if we can retire the thing in 4 years or 5 years or 6 years, I would say job well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to do a quick addition. And Mark, this is for you. I don't know if it's possible or not. My suggestion is, if not a stovepipe, create a reserve account for PSPRS, so you've at least got the money allocated and everybody knows it's there and that this is going to PSPRS. The question is when. Obviously, you know my thought is do it sooner than later. I find Phil's suggestion quite interesting.
Okay, thanks. Next. Okay, let's go back to Councilman Blair.
If I could, I just make one additional comment to Councilwoman Billy Orr's suggestion that we do a committee or someone to oversee the payments and everything. Please sign me up. I'll be happy to be on that committee.
There's a stack there.
Councilman Blair.
Well, we keep throwing out all these numbers and stuff, and, from my standpoint, and just bear with me for a minute, I made the valuation, the liability, 80 million. And if you take the 25 million we're talking about right now as a rounded number, we now owe 55 million. If you take our unfunded liability and our annual cost, let's just say it's 7 million, plus the 11 million from PSPRS, 0.75%. That's 18 million a year. Times 4 gives us $72 million towards that $55 million payment. We owe it to this people, the citizens of this community, to do what we promised them to do. And if we don't, I share to think and hate to think what's going to happen the next time a jail tax comes up or a school bond comes up and the public says, we gave you one more chance, you blew it. So we better stay to our guns here, folks.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Said well, Steve. Mr. Graybill had a question. What was the number that the Granite Mountain 19 added to our liability? Roundabout numbers, Mark.
Well, as you know, there were initially 6 in PSPRS, and that was valued at the time of the incident at about $5 million. State legislature approved annual payments of $1 million a year for 5 years to help cover that cost. Since then, again, additional people, beneficiaries have been added to the PSPRS. There's, I believe, 11 at this point. We have been in discussions with Senator Fan and Representatives Campbell and Stringer about going back to the state legislature to increase that funding from the state to cover these new liabilities associated with the hot shots. Total of the 11 is closer to 10 or 11 million. I've been in contact with PSPRS last week to be sure that I get a new number with the valuation that is going on right now so that we can work with our legislators going into the next legislative session to get that amount from the state discussed and hopefully covered.
Thank you for that explanation.
Of that $5 million, how much have we received so far?
I don't know if we've received the payment for 2018 yet. We usually get them in September, but we've received the $3 million each year up to this point.
So this would be $4 million this year possibly?
I believe so, yes.
Of the 5? Okay.
Yeah. And again, we check that every year to make sure, because we got to get PSPRS to bill the state, and then the state pays it. So we watch that to make sure that happens. And again, we're going to go back and try to get the additional money.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying we always had to ask for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here again, not to bring up Graybill again, but I will. Cause and effect consequence of your actions. And going back to why on earth were we the only municipality in the state of Arizona with a Type 1 incident command team that were employees of the city of Prescott? And I understand his comments, okay? So here again, we owe the liability. We own the pension. The courts have laid it all out. The state statutes govern how we function with regards to obeying the law. The laws say we got to pay it. That doesn't leave you much choice. We went to the voters and asked the voters, where does the money come from? The voters supplied us with the money, not only to pay the liability, but allowed us the liberty of being able to make our annual contribution too, out of the general fund. So we can do both, and the sooner the better.
Councilman Shiska.
Yeah, Mayor, in deference to the public who may have something more to say, I would like to get this taken care of once and for all and get the question asked.
Mayor, could I make a motion?
Go ahead.
I move to approve the payment of $11 million from the general fund unassigned fund balance to PSPRS, and to approve payment of $25,000 from the sale of the hotshot buggies to the to the PSPRS. Sorry. To the PSPRS Fire Trust.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second vote, please.
Passes 5-2.
Well, a closing comment from a founding father, John Adams. Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.